Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with co-host, replacement extraordinaire, Mr. Jerome Sawyer. How are you doing, sir?
And I'm good.
Yeah, it's
good. It's Monday. You know, I forgot.
I'm going to sing.
I sat in the car for 2 seconds. It's a sign of age, you know. I was like...
What am I supposed to be doing?
I was like, yeah. It was like, just the right date. What time it is. Like, I had a real moment in the car.
Don't feel bad. Yesterday I was going to my brother-in-law's house who lives down on, let's say, east of me.
Yeah.
But when I came out of my car, I turned west. I was by Delaporte and I realized, where am I going?
I just park. I was like, boy, what you doing? What day it is? We supposed to be, but yeah, I'm good though.
Well, you are good because I happened to, as I was home yesterday on the weekend, happened to be passing through the various channels.
Oh.
And came across one Jerome Sawyer, host of...
on the record.
No. Host of Miss World Bahamas.
Oh, that? Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
And, there was very emotional for you because you retired from the committee, I assume. They say you can still be hosting. I got the feeling you said you was finished with all of that.
No.
But
I still could be around doing
But
something.
this is what I said to my wife. I said, it is only certain people who can get away with being able to go to an upholstery shop.
A
right?
Fine upholstery.
A fine upholstery. Top notch.
I want you to think that was the whole fabric.
No. And say, you know what? I want that.
That is, yes.
Because that's the thing now. You could just get anything.
No, you could get anything, but that was a special kind of material.
You ain't get it from a upholstery shop?
No,
that come from a coat suit shop?
That come from away. They're from foreign.
Yeah, away. That come from Boy, Ken, you should see it. If you could pull that up on the internet, you should see that one, boy. I don't think I could get away. You think I could get away with that?
I don't know. It's, it's a kind of thing where you. All right, so let me take you to how it goes. I have a guy that I go to in Atlanta. Miguel Wilson is his name, and he has been doing my Miss Bahamas suits for the past 3 years.
Oh, you have various suits.
So
you have like an event suits.
And he does my suits for Miss Bahamas. So he has this really nice boutique. It's in Phipps Plaza in Atlanta. Shameless plug.
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah, it's like
that's how bad. That's how out it is. I know where a Hong Kong tailor is on. I know where a Hong Kong tailor is on Rosetta.
So Miguel. So I go in Miguel's shop. He's giving me like wine and different whatever you want, and then he's bringing out all these jackets.
The Hong Kong tailor I go to, they're just eating the shrimp fry. They don't offer me any.
No, but
they offer that service just for you.
This is in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So this is a guy.
It's high end.
So you go in and he brings out all these jackets and I just try on all these jackets and then I eliminate. I'm like, okay, I want this one. I don't want that one.
Oh, so these are pre-made. These aren't tailor-made.
He has. Well, he knows I'm coming.
Oh, I see.
So he has designs. And so we try on a bunch of designs and I was like, okay, yeah, no, and then I put on that one. I was like, I need to see nothing else.
Okay. So I was telling him, he was in this Miss Bahamas thing. Right. Did you see it, Ken? You find it? And I know he got. Listen, I know he got a copy of it. I know he carried around a picture. Yeah. And I said, let me see. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I said, why is it that I am not able to get over? Hey, why am I not able, Candy, to get through life by being able to go into an upholstery shop, get the material,
upholstery shop,
because I used to see them kind of thing on couch and stuff.
You see, I'm messy, right? So something like, okay, so print jackets and those are in now.
Okay,
so
I see that. Yeah,
but I see some fellas, no lie, they look at this up on setty material.
That's what I said. I thought. Yeah, that's why I said upholstery.
I have said that. I've gotten in trouble for saying that before.
That didn't quite come out right.
Swipe off setty material. That's my. Yeah.
Listen, on another note, it's a little. I'm seeing these pictures of these young ladies who were amongst others who died in the helicopter crash. That's serious stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's
serious stuff.
And her friends, three of her friends too.
That's unfortunate.
Wow.
I mean, it's a tragedy like that,
Yeah. Which goes to show, billions or zero.
No matter how much money you got.
When it comes, it comes.
And it is your time.
When it comes. So anyway, it was sad to hear that over the holidays.
Yeah.
How did you? Well, we are still. We had the national. Candy and I were involved in the National Pride Folk Festival. There was something else I wanted to talk about.
Before that?
No, it wasn't Jerome's thing, but there's something else I'm missing out. Oh, I know what it is. Yeah, we had the National Pride Folk Festival,
On
and
On Saturday,
and while we were doing it, I was
past.
kind of like, but you know what I realized? It was really truly a success.
Yeah.
I thought about it. When you think about it, while you don't have a captive single audience that comes say to a concert.
Right.
It's a pass through, right?
Right.
But I
It
figured
was a really
thousands
good
of people
steady
passed through there.
It was a steady flow of people all day.
Yeah, all day.
All day.
And you could really tell like when that junkin will lick up.
Yeah.
So
we were able to.
I'll
So
tell
we
you
were.
a joke.
So you
Yeah,
didn't
you
stop
can tell
because it
us.
was too hotty.
I like.
That's what we decided that for, as
No, it was
Mr.
fine.
Someone else would put it,
No.
for the noirs, we would in future we would go from 2 to 10
Yeah, no, seriously.
because
it was
noirs ain't coming out at noon.
No. Like we got a
The Bahamian noirs.
Our Miss Bomb was there, and
Yes.
so
And by the
yeah.
way, this is this stuff. Can tell you, this stuff always happens to me.
Yeah.
First of all, I was admiring her because that's what I do. And then I looked, and I was her mother was there, and she says, I didn't know it was her mother. She goes, "This is my daughter, and I've known her mother since she was a little child." Okay. And then I get home and it's on TV.
Yes.
So I didn't have any mystery about who was going to
There
win.
you go.
Isn't that weird how that stuff happens?
Yeah.
That was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
a replay.
they sent pictures, right, while she was out there, because we have a group, and then I do some of the social media. So they sent a guy. And he was doing something, and he had this thing in his hand, literally. So I said, "Well, what are you doing, like?" Rolling a joint? Is that a thing? Like, is that a part of our culture? I mean, I know we right there. But, like, but they told me he was actually involved in some type of craft. But how he was sitting and what he was doing, it was kind of awkward. But it
Right.
wasn't anything. I was just being silly.
It was a vendor?
Yeah, it was a vendor. He was actually showing him how to do it. But then, me being who I am in the group, I was like, this is true.
But what we learned is we listen. It went off
good.
smoothly.
Yeah.
It really has a lot of potential, and of course it relies on government supporting it next year, and I think we'll get a lot more sponsors next year as well. And we were able to see when you have something that you organize, what you want to be able to do is not be in a frenzy while it's going on.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
That's when you know it's a success.
Right, and we were able to sit back, Candy and I and
Yeah.
others, and to critique it.
Yes.
Right, as it was happening.
As it was happening, and to say, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, we can improve on this, as opposed to running around ragged trying to find out if the plug in, and
Right.
The light on.
you do all that ahead of time.
What I like about it, and what I like the festival. Well, I heard lots of good things about it. Let me say that. What I like though, and I see more of it, and I keep saying that I see it happening more and more. We're becoming to be more patriotic.
You think so?
I think that we are.
It's a slow
I
climb,
think
but yeah.
we are embracing independence. I remember used to be a day.
Right.
Yeah.
That was it.
Right.
July 10th, you get up, you hear Independence Morning on ZNS, and a couple of things that happen, and that would be it.
Yes.
But it is now people are embracing it days in advance, and it's almost, even driving here this afternoon, it's almost like a feeling. You pass the fort, people are practicing for that. You see the flags, on the flag poles. People are buying all of the shirt, the paraphernalia and the paraphernalia and the shirts, and people are gearing up, and
It's like
it's
the
really,
lead
By the
up,
way,
the
did
lead
they
up
have a
to
quarter?
it.
Did they have a 4 extra large?
Yes.
Good, because I can need that.
Okay.
The treat
That's
didn't
why
wait.
I
Look how many people are
That's what I
doing.
was asking.
Look how
I
many
got the
people are doing
Bahari shirt, the
Right,
Bahama shirt,
yeah.
but they must be European size.
They don't carry a size.
No,
Yes,
they
they
do.
do.
I had a
Yeah,
3X,
they do.
but the 3X was too small, so I got to get the
have
4X.
Oh, they do have a 4X.
They
They do
have
have 4X.
two.
Right, they get 5. I better get
Yeah,
But because it's European.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
European
it's
cut.
fitted,
Yeah, it's different.
right,
yeah,
in the
it's
bottom.
It's Bahamas
Yeah.
with European cut. No, but I am so impressed. And young people, especially when you look on social media and you see how people are ramping it up. So I'm always
That's why I
happy
brought
to
it
hear
up,
that,
because I was about to say, well, how was your holidays? And I realized, no, it isn't a
It isn't
holiday
out,
yet.
but it
But we
feels
started
Right.
from
No, but it
last week.
feels like you're
It's
kind
a nice
of in a
build-up.
holiday
It's
spirit.
Right,
you know?
right,
But,
right,
So
right.
yeah.
Hopefully next year we'll have downtown with the stores.
Yeah,
more,
getting more. Yeah,
more involved in
encourage them,
decorating.
Yeah,
And
get them to decorate.
Yeah.
Now used to do years ago the Christmas storefront competition. Maybe
Right.
do an independent
Right.
storefront
That's-
competition.
I'm actually
Hopefully for
looking
next
forward
year
to
we'll do
if
that.
we can get to where the DNP becomes a DNC, which is the Downtown Nassau Commission, and we have the adequate budgets. We should be the ones who are decorating Bay,
Yes.
Right.
and then they can do their windows.
Now, let me
Yeah.
say this.
You see?
I do want to say this.
No wraps.
And seriously, kudos, hats off, shirts off, whatever off. Congratulations to the coat of arms decoration downtown. I absolutely love it. Now, there may be every year I complain about how awful and darky the decorations are. To me, this is the first time me personally, Jerome, enjoy looking at the decorations. I was impressed from the moment.
Well, one of the things we insisted on.
I was impressed.
One of the things we insisted on, and with Cabinet's approval and the Independence Committee's approval, no more posters.
Yeah.
They had those posters with the wood standing up, leaning, and all that.
Yeah.
No more of them. You don't need that. Because, first of all, they go there, and then they stay there till, September.
Mm-hmm.
Independence is over.
Yeah.
So that's gone. We're gonna take a break, and we'll come back. We'll talk some more about it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here, along with Jerome Sawyer. I was going to say Gomez.
Every time I come
It's
on
a
the
different
show,
name,
I
yeah.
have a different last name.
Jerome Sawyer, who's filling in for Rogan Smith, and of course Candy is here with us. A lot of stuff going on. Before we get into your subject, though, Candy, and we'll talk about that as well. And by the way, our guest this afternoon is going to be Alfred Sears, who's going to talk about a range of things, and I'm sure your topic will come up as well. I just got to talk about, just very briefly, and I guess I do this with a great deal of pride, but it has to do with the things that are going on in this country that we're not aware of, that are at such top level. Now, my daughter, who I never stop bragging about, is at a place called the KP Luther Institute. And there is a lot of research going on in this country, especially in the marine sciences. And because we are essentially like just a living lab. And given our proximity to the United States, there's a lot of people coming here. And I had the opportunity to go on board a boat called the Alusha. And it's a boat owned by a billionaire who is essentially given this boat out to scientists around the world to be able to apply for a grant to do whatever project they want to do. Right. The project they were doing recently off the coast of Eleuthera was to go down and find the 6-gilled blunt-nosed shark, which can get up to about 30 feet.
What?
And it's essentially a vegetable, a plankton eater, a shrimp eater, and they have to. It lives in 1,000 meters.
Ooh.
That's 3,000 feet.
I know.
And they went down in a submarine. Not my daughter.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Canada.
Because there's only, but she was. But I'll tell you, I was so proud of her, Candy, because I went on this boat and I expected to see a bunch of students on it, and she was the only Bahamian, only woman who was working with this top-notch scientist. I mean, it's like Jacques Cousteau on steroids, and they're lowering this thing. Because I ain't going down 10 feet in a submarine, because I think this could crack.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay, but they're going down 3,000 feet, and then they have this kind of like a robotic arm where they shoot a tag into the shark so they can track it, etc. But the level of research, Jerome, that is going on in this country. So I'm going to say this to the people out there who are thinking about what they want to do in life and all that. The sky is the limit. Okay, the sky is the limit, and the resources that we have in this country, and the exposure that we can have if we would allow people who have the skill sets and the knowledge to come in, it only augurs well for this country's future, as well as for those of us, the young kids especially, who want to get into things that they don't think they can get into. It exists. Yeah. It exists. That's why I wanted to give them a big up on that.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Were they successful?
Yeah, they went. It's like a movie. So I think they had like 4 scheduled dives, and they missed like the first 3 times. And they got it like 12, because they go down at night too, because he's a nighttime nocturnal.
How big is the shark?
It can get up to 30 feet.
Right, so it depends on which.
But they're down 3,000 feet, man.
Oh wow!
I don't even know how that'd look.
You can't.
That's from like here to Elizabeth Avenue. I don't know, but going down.
Right. Pitch black.
Pitch black. Oh, because no matter what time of the day they go, it's pitch black.
Exactly. Wow. I know. Ooh.
That's incredible. They are doing some incredible things there, and in other places too. And I always have an issue too that we don't inspire our kids to be more.
Right.
And to go after more. You go, and this is not to take away from any profession, but you go to a school careers fair, and you see the kids crowded around the same tables all the time, and we don't inspire them to want to do more, to dream big.
I'll tell you,
I was just having this conversation with Ken. It's just I think our children sometimes know exactly what it is that's what they want to do, and they have ideas, but we have such limiting.
Yeah.
And I told you a story about how I almost was involved with holding my kid back from this because I was like, well, I don't know if there's much of the future. Well, no, I was like, I don't know much of a future. But the reality is, when I went on that boat and I stepped back and I saw her interacting with world-renowned scientists, and they also gave me their impression of her.
Right.
Okay, but the reality is, you're talking with a guy. This was right after the shark attack, right? Who is the world expert and the go-to person on shark attacks, and the fact that we aren't even aware nationally to avail ourselves of this knowledge, and it's right there.
Yeah.
And he was here.
He was here.
Right.
So on that boat. And in fact, there were two or three. There's another guy who's at FSU, who my daughter is very close with, who is a very worldwide known expert on sharks, but more so the sawtooth, what do they call it, swordfish.
Yeah,
okay, which is very rare. They have, I don't know how much in the world. And in the Bahamas, we have some. And Atlantis is the only place where they ever reproduce in captivity.
Right.
Okay, and this guy is an expert on it, and these are the kind of people that we can avail ourselves of. I asked him, I said, look, would you be open to making yourself available to the government of the Bahamas so that, they can call on you? Definitely. These people get excited about, these things anyway, right?
Yeah, they're passionate,
right. But so we just have to find a way, Jerome, to reach out. And with all credit, I spoke to the Minister of Agriculture and Marine Sciences about it, and he was definitely excited about it. But, I don't even know if we're aware of these things.
No. And it's too because, again, we are so limiting.
And limited as well.
That was nasty.
We are closed. We are closed. We are closed. We are closed. We are closed shop. I was talking today at a conference about if I had a wish, what would it be with regard to the economic development of this country? And it's simply just getting the government funnel out of the way. Everything has to funnel through 6 or 7 guys. That means it's already limited for time and knowledge. We just have to open up, and then we have to just be careful about how we allow, when it comes in, how we're monitoring what's going on. Mm-hmm. How the Bahamians get the best advantage of the benefit of this stuff.
And therein, too, is the fear, Sometimes we keep people out because we are worried. And it's not always without cause. But sometimes I think we are worried that Bahamians are going to get left out or left behind or aren't going to. And I think we do ourselves harm sometimes with that because
you know why? We're left out by not having it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're not on the playing field, man.
Yeah.
We have to think abundance.
Yeah. And expertise and think global and
Look, I can tell you now that just on that the fact that this boat was there. This is like a 200-foot boat, helicopter, submarine, lab, everything. That fortunately, and I feel fortunate that my child got to be on that boat for a week.
Wow.
I know now where she's headed.
Yeah.
Because it ain't going to be small.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be.
It
can't be limited to that.
Yeah.
So.
And then the thing is, the other thing that we have to safeguard against too is if your child or young people go off and get these experiences and become qualified, and when they come back home, you can't say to them, I need you to go work in the Department of Fisheries in this office.
Right.
I went through it. I went through it personally myself.
Fishing permits. That's your job.
I went through it myself,
and
man.
that's the other fear that you have, that you go, you educate yourself, you go off, you get all this experience, you have all these connections, you come back, and then it is as if you hit a stone wall.
Listen, forget about stone wall, a hole of hell. I came back from graduate school, all excited. And I won't say the office that I went to because I don't want to denigrate, people or places. And I went into this building to get for my first day, and I thought to myself, this is the exact thought I thought. This is what I went to school to come back to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I remember having the same feeling.
And so, allow others to come in to give opportunity. See, George Smith said when he came here many years ago, I can't remember, one of the faults of the original government was that they focused on getting people jobs. And that was a natural thing to do. They wanted to get people who couldn't work in the bank because of the color of their skin into the bank. But what they should have focused on was how to develop opportunities. And when you allow others in, like let's say we want to have a hot air balloon race. Well, we don't have no hot air balloons here.
Right.
So some people have to come in with hot air balloons. And then maybe someone will end up where they're making, hot air balloons for, export.
Right.
Oh,
I don't know.
The baskets.
Yeah, the baskets or whatever. Maybe we use it sisal.
Yeah.
They use hemp. You can use sisal.
Yeah.
See, we have to realize, the world is at our fingertips, literally at our fingertips. And so we're exposed, our children are exposed to so many other things than what, growing up with the traditional lawyer, doctor, teacher, accountant, and things like that.
Or maybe
I have a nephew. My nephew he's going off in September. He's already done a year in college. He wants to be an astrophysicist. And
he ain't gonna be that here.
To do. No.
Well, he's not going to be here.
No, he won't, and that's okay. But
and that's the fear too, that parents have. I'm sure that you want if your child takes on that career or that chosen path, automatically, well, hey, they ain't coming back.
Let me show you how. But let me show you something. If we weren't narrow, it may be because they used to the capsules used to drop down in Bahamian waters. You know that. That's where they used to, what they call it, splash down. Okay, you got Ortec doing submarine. It's top secret, but they got submarine. There's nothing to say that there's not a lab or something here, or what do you call it? What do you call those things? An observatory or something that couldn't happen here.
Right.
But we have to be prepared that when someone who might be out of his mind comes and says, "Listen, I want to set up an observatory here because this is the best location for this particular thing." Okay.
No,
and he says, and I'm going to need 3 work permits for some astrophysicists.
Yep.
Well, sorry. And why are we sorry? Oh, because, we don't just give work permits like that. Yeah. Why? Because we have a plethora of astrophysicists?
What, you guys no babies for that?
Okay. As opposed to who's going to build the facility. And when her nephew wants to then come and be an astrophysicist, voila, there's a facility here for him to start to be accepted. And this is, by the way, he will choose to come back here because, hey, he'll be the preeminent Bahamian astrophysicist.
Yep.
So anyway, we got a long way to go. Yeah. But Candy, you wanted to bring up some stuff as well.
Well, the buzz from last week, with the whole Brent Simonette and situation is the whole race conversation that people don't seem to be ready to have in this country, or don't want to address certain realities on both sides, by the way. So I just wanted to open the floor to that conversation.
And I'm sure Alfred Sis, who's going to be our guest, will allude to some of it as well, because we spoke earlier. It's a tricky thing. Yeah,
I saw a post actually, which made me want to talk about it. I saw a post on Facebook, and someone said that, and this is probably
you're quoting.
Yeah, step on some people, corns.
But you didn't do the stepping. You're quoting.
No, I'm just quoting. I did not write this, but they said something like, racists don't only come in white.
No, of course not.
Right. Oh, but the feedback and the kickback.
Yeah, well, you don't. Yeah, that's
that.
why I don't get into that stuff.
Right. So
But you know how you can prove that. Let me tell you how you can prove.
If we can't even be aware of that.
But let me tell you how you can prove that to people who are closed-minded. If you go to Africa, okay. See, this is about tribalism. It's not about race. It's about tribes. So if you go to Africa, which is 99% black, okay, and you go to, say, I don't know, the Congo, okay? If you go to the Congo, okay, the reality is, let's say they're all black. Well, the reality is they have problems amongst each other, okay? It is tribal, folks. Yes, hue is a tribe, okay, but it's still a tribe, okay? Hitler, Jews, white. They were white, but they had different cultural differences, whatever the deal is, okay? You go to China, to you and I, everyone look Chinese. But they got some hill Chinese, some lowland Chinese, some flatland Chinese. We don't know, they all look Chinese to us. But they have problems with each other, okay? So we just have to get past not understanding. And then Rogan and I had a very long conversation about this. And one of the topics was the fact that it's so hard to have this conversation. And she says, well, why? And I said, why?
Is it so hard?
And she said, well, because, so she said, white people may feel that they can't bring up the subject or they never want to talk about it. I said, well, maybe they don't want to talk about it because of maybe how they have to be felt. Like, I'm a 2019 white.
Right.
And I'm being asked to justify the 1860
I'm being held
great grandparent who wasn't even a slaveholder,
nothing to do with
white.
Yeah.
And then so it deteriorates. The argument deteriorates. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about this for about 5 more minutes when we get back, and then we got our guests. Here along with hashtag Candy. And hashtag Jerome and hashtag Ken and hashtag my glasses.
No,
okay?
At Candy.
I don't
Jerome,
care.
At Candy.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, does it? Okay.
Hashtag yes, it does.
Okay. And you have to do the hand? Yeah.
Because it's annoying.
You look like an invalid. All right, so look at it. So that's probably not hashtag politically correct.
Right.
Okay, so we were talking about, and by the way, our guest, and he's going to be on in about 3 or 4 minutes, is Alfred Sears, who you're going to get into a couple of things, and we'll get into that at the end of what we're talking about. But, without expounding, I think it's one of those things where I don't believe talking about it resolves it. People always say we need to talk about it. No, I don't think it resolves it. I think people have deep, dark hatreds, deep ingrained prejudices, that they will never get over. And in fact, when they start to talk about it, they only get into a big argument. I think you just have to be educated enough to know what is what and how to maneuver these things in life. Tribes will be tribes.
You're never going to eliminate racism.
Never.
The best you can hope for is to sensitize people enough to know what is inappropriate for you to say. And it's just, and I use the American, and I use the American version. Like, people say, since Trump has taken over, all these things happen. Well, all these things have been just beneath the surface. Oh, yeah. They've been going on all this time, but now he's emboldened and people feel empowered to say and do things that they've always wanted to do, and so now it's just sort of a spotlight on it. And it continues, and it will continue. And the thing is, we all possess some level of racism
or
and
prejudice.
Bias or prejudice in us.
Because I was going to say that
I do not like. I make fun of.
Yeah.
In certain groups, I can openly say that. I make some jokes. I will never say them publicly.
Right.
See, I think it's important to note the difference between racist, and having prejudices. Right? Because and it depends on the definition that you're using for racist. Because you could have, there's a standard definition where, you have, I'll say it right here, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. But then you also have another definition where it's described as a system of disadvantages based on race. And so that's why I asked the question, like, can black people really be racist?
Yes.
As opposed to, yes, they have
Everyone
their...
can be racist.
Yes.
Period. That's all to it.
What I'm saying is, but black people don't benefit from a system that puts an entire race at a disadvantage.
Okay.
That's
You
all
want me
I'm
to tell you about
saying.
the system? Bahamians and Haitians. Okay?
Right.
That's a system. All right? So, yeah. Okay? Get over
that's
it.
not based on race.
It's based on what,
Color.
nationality?
Yeah, that's something.
Well, whatever it's based on something, it's still something
I get it,
ist.
but I don't know if that's not what we're talking
It's
about.
still ist. It's still an ist. It's discriminate. Because here's the deal: you can't really be racist unless you're willing to apply that racism to discriminating against someone.
Well, yeah. Well,
Okay.
now discrimination against even
Whatever.
or within the black community is a whole different. That's a whole different conversation too.
In my view,
Why?
it's.
What do you mean? Why?
You mean
That's
internally?
a whole other level. Yes.
Yeah, but because there's
There's
discrimination
different
at all
levels,
levels,
yeah.
at every level,
but
within groups, outside of
Because-
groups.
Let me tell you why I asked you why. Because we are, as black people, we are quick to accuse white people and other races of disadvantaging us and being racist towards us.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute we have no issue walking away from that same conversation
Yeah.
and attempting to do it to our own people
I
and
agree
having no
with you.
issue with that.
Right.
You know, and Ed made a perfect example.
Yeah.
The Bahamian Haitian example, the
We
Bahamian
ain't talking
Jamaican
about that,
example.
Yeah. No, I agree
You know,
with you.
and
The Bahamian foreign example.
and,
Yeah.
and we have no problem attacking others on their wrong. But the moment
Yeah.
that is now turned onto us, oh no.
See,
No, I
imagine
agree
this.
with you. I
Imagine.
agree.
Imagine. I want.
You're
I want you
right.
to imagine this now.
You're right.
You can be in a room of mixed people, mixed grouping of people, Bahamians, non-Bahamians, and Bahamians will very clearly say, we don't need the foreign man here. We don't need this one here. Now imagine if that were reversed, and the foreign guy said, well, you do need us here because this is our money, and you know what? You're not educated.
Bruh.
Remember that happened with the
Yes,
guy from
yes.
Robbie C?
Gee.
Yeah.
He made a statement that many people would make that we're not educationally prepared. But you see, he ended up losing his job because he's a racist.
Yes.
And maybe he was. I know he isn't. I know the guy. But I'm just saying that has nothing to do with the statement he made.
Right.
Okay? He made an observation on a reality, but we don't like hearing it from him.
No.
Okay? So that's why I say, look, if we're lucky, and I'm glad that we're having Mr. Sears in here because, I would put him in this category. If we're lucky, you'll have enlightened leadership to do what is right for the country, to do what is right for, the nation and our people. And you hope that as you do that, more and more people come into the light.
What I do have an issue with, though, is that when it's convenient for us, we defer. And let me just say this: the Bahamian experience is different in many ways than the African American experience. And when it's convenient for us, we defer to slavery, we defer to civil rights, we defer to
Because no other people
oppression.
were slaves, you see.
We defer to these things, and that's our
The Jews didn't have to be exterminated. They weren't. All of these things happened. The Israelites and all of these things happened.
Yeah.
But it's
Convenience.
But yeah. Anyway, we got to run. I want to bring our guest in. Candy, thank you very much
Yes, sir.
for the many gifts,
Yes.
and thank you for Friday and Saturday and all the other days. I'm here with Jerome Sawyer, who is our co-host while Rogan is out, and Alfred Sears is our guest, and he needs no introduction. Former Minister of Education, former Attorney. Were you the Attorney General? Yeah. Former Attorney General.
4 years.
Yeah, man. Former many things, and presently an attorney and doing his activism, and of course also ran for the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party in the last cycle. Alfred, I want to talk to you about a number of things. You talked about local government. You talk about decriminalization of marijuana. You talked about moving the capital to Andros. And, of course, most recently, this issue of racism and our polarization along those lines. Is it any different from our just polarization in everything. I mean, let's face it, we're polarized by political party. Why wouldn't we be polarized by race? That's an obvious physical difference. Are there any major departures from these things? There may be different embryos that they've come from, right? But at the end of the day, they're the same type of poison and toxicity, isn't it?
Well, thank you for inviting me. Well, first of all, I think that we are still trying to clarify for ourselves as a people how do we reconcile legacies of the past? How do we achieve the aspirations that we have and were presented to us, that is as the objective of independence. But also, I think that part of the problem is that none of the political parties in our country deal with political education. We put out a platform right before before general elections. But as a member of a political party, we're not engaged in rational, critical examination of the economy, of the sociology of the society, of the culture, and this is really one of the key functions of any political party, is to raise consciousness so that when people go out to canvass, to represent a party, every representative has the preparation and the analysis and the critical reflection to engage in the kind of persuasion within the society that the political party has this ideology, and this ideology will translate into these policies, and these structures will be created to create a more inclusive, a more sustainable. So political education, we saw there was more of the political education during the suffragist movement. You had the leaders, especially people like Althea Mortimer, talking about the UN Charter, about different documents, human rights documents, and relating them to the internal process. During the struggle for majority rule, there was much more critical introspection, education about what was happening in certainly the United States and the civil rights movement, but also in terms of more. We had more papers presented to the population, white paper, green paper on independence. Paper, so there was more rational education going on.
But is that because, Alfred, there was a central kind of unifying cause? When you think about majority rule, when you think about women's right to vote or the universal right to vote, when you think about those movements, right, they were a kind of a central theme that everyone could be pulled into, okay? There were no, everyone, I would say the vast majority of those who were black wanted majority rule. The vast majority of people who couldn't vote wanted to vote. So it was a central pool. Then we got to independence, which started to get a little divisive. And now what you have is there is not a central theme, because the theme is, I want to win. My party wants to win. That's the theme. And so that's just, and George Washington said, partisanship will be the end of democracy. Okay.
Yeah, but the thing is this, the question is, why do I want to win? Is it because this one is a thief? Is it because this one is corrupt?
Because I want power.
So again, I think that in terms of nation building, there has to be conversation about what the future architecture of the Bahamas should be. And that really isn't a question of name, or it ought not to be a process of name calling. It's really how do we change the architecture? Let me give an example, and this is not a popular example within our context. When Stafford Sands was trying to build a new architecture, he had to go out of his comfort level. In terms of year-round tourism and financial services, he reached over to the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, Henry Milton Taylor. Right. And he said, look here, let us travel together. Taylor was appointed as a member of the development board, and they traveled together. They made 4 trips together to Europe. And
by the way, no one knew that except just now. Go ahead.
Except
you.
And the only thing they agreed is that, look, during these trips, we're not going to talk about partisan politics. Now, Taylor took a risk because while he was off and by sitting on the development board, you had people like Pindling and Folks and Hannah and all of them saying, well, he's collaborating. But the point I'm making is look how compelling it was as they went into New York, went into England and Europe, and they said, look here, if the UBP were to lose, here is the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party. We share this common vision of year-round tourism, of foreign direct investment, of financial services. You see, it took a certain level of sophistication on both sides, and risk. Certainly, I mean, it was almost fatal for Taylor. But the fact of the matter is that the architecture that was being constructed at that time people had to move outside of the kind of stereotypical positions in order to shape and advance, advocate, promote this new architecture. And I believe that we have reached a diminishing return on this Stafford Sands model, and we need to create a new architecture.
But the devolution of let me see how I can phrase this. The partisanship devolution started almost immediately, right? In fact, and I'd never knew about this, by the way. I'm just learning about this now. But the mere fact that
Taylor's book.
But by the mere fact that he took that risk, right, actually lent fuel to the partisanship devolution, because they were able to say he's collaborating, etc., creating a divide, right? Creating a divide, a split with the Henry Taylors and the Cyril Stevensons and that sort. So I understand, by the way, the truest leader is the one who's willing to take that risk, because you see the big goal, you see the big picture, not the immediate self-survival type picture, right? But how do we then now, Alfred, nurture that sort of thing? We have, political parties in place. We have big, machinery. How do we now say to when, let's just say now you have the leader of the opposition and the prime minister, and we want to look at a new paradigm. How does in this environment, the prime minister of the country, and I think it would have to be him, invite the leader of the opposition to come into his world, so to speak, or his world view of something, to promote something that's for the benefit of the country, without the leader of the opposition just saying, A, well, that's a bad idea, and B, I don't want to take the risk that I'm going to lose my position, as Sir Henry did.
And Stafford Sands. I think to move out of reactive politics, there has to be a vision. There has to be a vision in terms of a future architecture that you want to build.
Extremely inspirational. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? It has to be moving beyond this current status quo And then it requires tremendous confidence and sophistication to be able to reach over across this political divide, because we stereotype each other in order to win elections. In other words, it wasn't until, for example, after the struggle for majority rule, and you had this period in the 70s, 80s, up to the Commission of Inquiry of 1984, and you had a split within the PLP. You had the victimization of former colleagues, and you had this extraordinary campaign that, especially after 1984, was that the chief was a thief. So you had the stereotyping, just like the stereotyping by the PLP of the UBP,
Right.
is that the personification of evil was Bay Street.
Right.
So you have this stereotyping as a means of political mobilization.
Right.
And it was only when Pinling died, when Sir Lyndon died, younger people said, my goodness, I didn't realize that what he had done. Especially after Nelson Mandela came and said thank you for the work that had been done at Chogam under the leadership of Sir Lyndon. So you had a generation that came up in the 80s that had been conditioned to see the PLP in a certain way. And also, you saw the same reaction to Ingram as authoritarian and so on.
They pick a thing.
Exactly.
It's tribal. It's tribal.
It is tribal. But the point that I'm making is that at some point we have to see that a country. This is the only country I have lived in where foreign direct investors are treated more favorably than nationals.
But I disagree with that.
You could let me explain why. I mean, I've sat in the cabinet,
Right.
and the only people that we negotiate heads of agreement with are foreign direct investors.
Correct.
And
why is that?
And well, first of all, they're Bahamians who generate as much jobs as foreign.
But they don't need to go through NEC.
Yeah, but the point is this: they don't get the concessions. That's the point I'm making.
Name me a concession, Alfred, that a foreign person gets that a Bahamian doesn't get.
Well, first of all, Atlantis.
HEA.
Let me tell you, the casinos at Atlantis. They get an exemption on 50% tax. That is, the law says 5% over 100 million or whatever. But the heads of agreement cuts that down by 50%. Under the budget of the Ministry of Tourism, notwithstanding whether Atlantis is making a profit or not, the Bahamian taxpayers, they give them $5 million cash. They call it a promotional contribution. The same thing we do for Bahama. The same thing we did for in Freeport. In other words, a subsidy. That's what you call it. We don't subsidize. Let me just finish. Then, as you know, since you asked the question, the budget of the Ministry of Tourism is $50 million. $20 million goes to these contracts, about $20 million for promotion. We have allowed a group of primarily foreign, but a group of business persons to take the resort levy. In every room, every room that is rented.
I know what it is.
Okay, of course you do.
It was stamped by the Ministry of Tourism.
Look here.
Yeah, I can tell you the history.
No, I know the history.
Right,
You can't tell me the history.
Well, no.
First of all, you know the history. What is that based on? What legislation allows?
Legislation.
No. We have allowed the Paradise Island and New Providence Promotion Board to take roughly $50 million in resort levy. That $50 million is not subject to any review by the Auditor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Their annual statement does not have to be presented to Parliament, and it is taxpayers' money that...
Wrong. Absolutely wrong.
So what is it?
So I'll tell you what it is. It's because this is one thing.
What is it?
And I'll tell you what it is. I forget the year when Sir Clement Maynard signed
I have the letter.
Yeah. But the money comes from the resort guest that pays a percentage to this organization. Well, it pays it to the hotel, and that money goes into the NPIPB. It does not come from taxpayers. You're saying
it's a tax. It's a tax on the guests of Atlantis.
But you
they
said
have
it's
no
taxpayers' money.
No, hold on. It's a tax.
But
it's
on
a
whom?
tax.
On whom?
It's a tax on the guests.
On the guests. Okay,
but it's a tax.
But you said it's taxpayers' money.
The guests have no choice. No private person, other than just buying my service, can impose a tax, a levy, on a consumer other than by way of a tax.
Let me say this to you, Alfred, so we can move on to the point. Because I know you're right. You're right on that. But let me say this to you, because I know this is frustrating you. But let me say this. It was designed that in the days when you didn't have a lot of marketing dollars, to co-opt marketing dollars to spend for the marketing of the destination. Now, let me say this. Tomorrow, you could ban that. Okay?
So
tomorrow. Let me finish. You could ban that. And each hotel could raise their room rate by an even smaller percentage, and it would have no impact in terms of where that money goes. It would be their money to spend how they want without any scrutiny. Period. Full stop.
As a Bahamian,
I'm just telling you that.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
As a Bahamian, I would prefer that impositions on guests. I'm not talking about your price. You could put whatever price you want. But that price, that would be to the hotel owner. But what I'm saying is that if it is in the form of a room tax or levy, that it ought to go to the promotional entity, that it could be jointly constituted by hoteliers and the state. But we have an entity called the Ministry of Tourism. Their sole purpose by law is to engage in promotion of the jurisdiction. And we have taken equivalent to their budget, and that is in the hands of the promotion board.
Well, it's based on occupancy. That's how you get the rate. That's how you get the rate. So it's not the equivalent of the budget. They can set a budget.
I'm talking about $50 million
first of all, the number is not $50 million.
What is it?
It's around $35 million.
$35 million?
Okay, but Alfred, accuracy is important.
$35 million?
Yeah, but you can't go around and say $100 million if it's $20 million.
And who controls these boards?
The board, the ministry, the Director General sits on the board.
The Director General does not have a vote. Does not have.
He does not have a vote. Yes. But I'm saying to you, look, if you want to say that, that's fine. I don't want to, I'm not disagreeing with you in principle. All I'm saying to you is the money is spent.
Just talking about facts.
It is spent on the promotion of the Bahamas. The numbers, they are audited. Anyone who can have access to that audit. And the reality is that the money has been
spent. Can you provide me with the audit?
I'm sure they can.
As a Bahamian.
Okay. But the reality is that the money is spent on the promotion of the Bahamas, and we have seen the success as a result of that money being spent. Now, we have other issues. I mean, I don't want to.
Look here, you can carry me anywhere you want to carry me.
Yeah. So now I want to ask you about. Recently, you said you made statements about the decriminalization of marijuana. I mean, I know this is a big leap forward, but I want to take this because all of these subjects are just so seismic in their discussion. I saw Delton Fernando make a statement the other day about the impact of that decriminalization would have. And I sent him a note. I haven't gotten a response yet. Maybe he had a wrong email address. That I'm more concerned about the impact criminalization has had. And I would rather someone, quote unquote, destroy their own life by their own choice than the state, by criminalizing something, destroy their lives through that means. I want to know how you feel about that philosophical approach to it.
Well, first of all, I begin with the science. The science with respect to cannabis or marijuana is that it has a less addictive impact than alcohol, and we know from the research sociologically in terms of accidents on our roads, in terms of domestic violence, it's associated more with the consumption of alcohol. Also, it does have a proven medical use. And the third thing is that recreational use I see really as being less harmful than alcohol. But it should be regulated, because the fact that it is not regulated it leads to the illegal guns, criminal enterprises engage in or managing this particular these transactions. And fourthly, the Rastafari movement, the Rastafari faith from this region, it is part of their sacrament, and the Constitution, as I understand it, respects all expressions of faith. And just as I value my faith, I have to
If I were to say you can't take wine in your service, that would be the same thing.
Exactly, and so I believe that as we seek to govern, and it must be rational. It should be regulated. The state can get, and of course, regulated by age, as we do with alcohol,
Public
as
use.
we do with gaming, and that where the focus, I believe, should be in terms of education is teaching the value of
Making right choices.
responsible choices, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana. In other words, we have to develop an ethic within our society of balance, of responsible choices. But certainly, I think that everything that I have studied and understand, it should be regulated, and we should do it based on as a sovereign people. Because trust me, when the majority of states in the United States regularize it, we will do it almost automatically without any sensible tailoring of laws rooted in our sociology, in our
we'll just do it.
culture, and so on.
If I could, I similarly, I remember, I mean, not on this level, but I remember, and I think a lot of, when you spoke to Mr. Fernandez, President of the Christian Council, and being sort of driven by that, but I remember sort of this whole, previously we had discussions of normalizing legalizing gaming. I mean, Sunday shopping. And it took us to the point almost where it was almost a rush now, because the rest of the world had moved forward.
We didn't want to seem like we were the last ones.
And we were running to catch up. When we do that, it to me, and I think a lot of Bahamians see it that way, the discussion is, why do we always have to be last? And why is it that we always have to be, does certain communities have to lead these discussions? Why is it that when the church decides that it opposes something, then it is almost as if it comes to a complete screeching halt? The minute the church gets up and says, we don't want this, then
everyone else is
going to hell if we continue to have this discussion. But a lot of people, feel as if we are even at this stage behind in the discussion. And how is it that we have allowed this to happen again?
The church is an important social partner But when
That's very polite.
when the government is elected by us,
Yes.
because we have a secular government, we don't have a
Yes.
theocratic government, and the government should not be pandering to me or to anybody. The government should listen to civil society, have consultation, inform itself based on the research and the preparation by the ministries and by experts and so on. And the government should make decision in the national interests. You cannot allow any sectarian group to hijack the conversation, and you're pandering because you want that vote and so on. I think, this country needs some politicians.
In every 5 years. We're making decisions in 5 years.
But see, Alfred, this comes back to
Continue.
the common theme here, and this is where it comes to leadership. Okay? Are we going to? We got a break. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about the Andrews thing. But leadership. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, a spirited discussion here, which will be continued off air, I'm sure, after the show. But we were talking about, we were talking about decriminalization of marijuana. And by the way, it's only really a symptom. We could talk about a myriad of issues, but they're really only a symptom of being hijacked by groups that oppose, that happen to have more clout than other groups. It could even be a minority group, as you well know, that hijack these discussions. How is it from a national point of view, nationally, globally speaking, when you're dealing with nations, is it a crapshoot that you happen to get someone who is in a position of power that can take you to where you need to go, and that the reality is that the odds are against you?
Well, the thing is this, leadership, we have to choose the leadership we want and not wait for a crapshoot, because we all grew up together. We know each other. I mean, we're not strangers to each other. We do not pay sufficient attention, but there are foreign investors who come into this environment, and there are other interests within this society. They identify someone sometimes long before they get to the position. Just as Barack Obama in the United States was identified long before we got to know him as a prospect, and people put support behind that person. I think
with
that
good intentions many times.
Of course. And you have to expect that people who have vested interests in this society, we all do, but you have persons in terms of business interests and so on, and they recognize how this system works. It's extremely hierarchical. If you are the prime minister in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, there are hardly no checks on you. You determine the executive, you control the parliament, you make appointments to the judiciary. Every person who represents the Bahamas outside of the Bahamas is appointed not by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but by the Prime Minister. You appoint all of the heads of the boards and the commissions and so on. So, and then the tradition and determine the election. So even if they do a vote of no confidence against you, you still have control of the state until the election is determined. You also control, by tradition in this place, you control 2.2 million acres of land. And there's no policy how you give that land to whom and on what terms.
Alfred, my friend, this is why I said the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, we went from being a figurehead monarchy to a constitutional monarchy with the power to give lands and titles. Right? That's what it is, right? I mean, you cannot put it any clearer than that, my friend.
Yes,
you have the power to give lands and titles.
Yes. we need to determine as a people what kind of architecture that we want to set in place so that the leadership is a servant leadership. Right now, the leadership is a master leadership because the power is so centralized. There are very little checks and balances.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And enormous.
This kind of segues into, by the way, the local government argument of devolving centralization, right?
Absolutely. I firmly believe in local government, and certainly for the majority of people in this country who reside in New Providence, there should be a system of local government. We also need this one of the few Commonwealth countries where the local government authority does not have revenue-raising authority, is not involved in economic promotion of its area. So we need to really devolve power to the citizens. That dump out there on Tonic Darling Highway, if the people in that area had control, who breathed the fumes, that problem would have been resolved long time. But when you have people who are remote and you know they have to make decision, you have to go to them to get a speed bump through your road. You have to go to the member of parliament or the minister to get the garbage removed. You see, we have put the colonial structure where we were subjects and not citizens. That structure has essentially been preserved.
And by the way, you know, and I fully agree with you on this. We don't disagree on a lot of things, Mr. Sears. But it is the structure and the system that causes us to starve of the capacity, from the capacity to grow outside of it, right? I mean, it's like an imploding system. I'm hopeful because, as you know, there's a local National Advisory Commission for local government for New Providence, strong local government that requires mandated funding, and that hopefully that will also recreate that which occurs in the Family Islands. But until we get that decision making at the community level, we're going to always be faced with these issues.
And I'm very hopeful as well.
Yeah.
Senator Henfield invited me, and I had an opportunity to spend a few hours with them. And it is my hope, based on what I heard, that we will really change this architecture in terms of improving local government nationally, but most especially rolling out a system of local government in New Providence.
Yeah, the presentation, in fact, I did a voiceover for it just recently, is almost done, and hopefully there'll be a presentation to Cabinet. It is the one thing, Alfred, that if there's any kind of promise that I would like to see, because, it's one thing to promise a bus station or whatever. Those aren't systemic issues. You need something that's, to your word, I'm going to use your word from now on, the architecture. I always say structural. Structural change has to happen in order for there to be growth.
I do have a question, though. I think for most people living in New Providence, the concept of local government is almost foreign in that we don't understand how it works, because what we see on the Family Island certainly is a dysfunctional system.
It's not even a system.
Or whatever it is. And we don't see it working in this context. And so whatever is brought to the public, to particularly for those of us on this end, there has to be a huge educational program for us to understand how it works, because we are so dependent upon the system.
We're mentally dependent.
And you are quite right. If you want something done, if I want something done in my area, I have to seek out my MP.
The irony is one of the examples
and that's all I know.
The irony is one of the examples given in the presentation is what occurs now in terms of what you have to do. You go to your MP.
Yes.
Your MP goes to a parliamentary colleague. The parliamentary colleague goes to some government department, and so on and so on. As opposed to you being able to go to your local government, and that local government simply calls a contractor to fix the pothole.
But then the difficulty becomes if your representative is in opposition, because things then get moved slower.
Oh, you mean in the
Yes,
existing system?
Yes. If your representative is not sitting in government per se, then the system,
which should not be the case.
Yeah, and that is the case.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes even more tenuous, and we don't, we as Nasuvians or even people in general do not understand, and I don't think Family Islanders even understand it fully.
Alfred, talk to us in the last minutes that we have about this I saved the grandest one for last. This very seemingly gargantuan, almost impossible thing of moving the capital to Andros.
The political architecture of the Bahamas is dysfunctional. It is inadequate. And the House of Assembly, I sat in there for 10 years. We have no library. We don't have a draftsperson. In fact, if a member of the opposition wants to bring a member's bill, they have to go and beg the Attorney General to have either the law reform or the office of the Attorney General, one of the drafters, to do it. Most parliaments have a draftsperson that's available, especially to minority members and independent members of the parliament, to have that skill available. In the House of Assembly, we have one bathroom with one toilet. To be used by members of parliament, the staff, and also the public. And the press.
Which is scarier.
Well, you have one female and one male, but only one toilet.
Okay.
And then you also have, if I'm in a wheelchair, I cannot access my parliament.
You can't go upstairs.
You can't go upstairs. The
I
parliament
don't
is
know why
upstairs.
They got the ramp, but that's what they say downstairs.
I mean, that's right. The most you could do is really come in and then watch it on TV.
Yeah.
You could have done that at home. We also don't have proper facilities. If you're a Family Island member of Parliament and you don't have a business in Nassau,
You should have an office.
I mean, where do you meet your constituents when they come and travel from the Family Islands and they want to engage their member of Parliament? I mean, where do you meet them? Probably in a restaurant or something. There are no facilities and this is the law making for the peace, order, and good government of the Bahamas. We have a cabinet. The cabinet meets in the Churchill building, which was condemned over 20 years ago. And there are no conference facilities, so cabinet committees really will have to probably go in the Prime Minister's office there. We don't have library facilities. We don't have research facilities. There are no dining facilities. And then when we look at the office of the Prime Minister, I mean, if the Prime Minister wants to entertain a head of state or a head of government, you have to go to a hotel. There are no facilities, no official residence. You may have to take them to your apartment, but you don't have any official residence for the country. Then when you look at the judiciary, we're renting Safri Square. We are renting down at Euro Canadian building. The judges are in makeshift quarters. They don't have an opportunity to easily conference. And also, when you look at the unique function of the judiciary, we don't have secure holding facilities within the facility. We are carrying people in chains through the street. The judges have to traverse the same passageway as the public and family of defendants. The rooms are so small that family members of accused persons sit next to the family of witnesses, and the ease of intimidation. So the thing
Are you
is,
saying that you move the central structure to another island?
I'm saying that we move the central structure. First of all, the building of infrastructure could be an economic stimulus. And rather than, we don't have the space here in Nassau for new architecture, use that stimulus to develop Andros. Andros has the land. It has 4 airports. We have fresh water. We have the proximity in terms of travel to New Providence, and people commute all over the world.
Well, that's a tall order.
No, but it's a tall order, but this is what sovereign people do.
Yeah, but
this is what Singapore did.
Yeah, but Singapore is one land mass. I mean, they're not moving from another
Singapore
island.
has different islands.
Yeah, but they're not moving their whole capital to another island.
Yeah,
I don't oppose it. I'm just talking about the logistic capacity.
No. But the thing is this: it doesn't have to be done overnight. It's something we need. We need a grand plan. And since we have to build this political infrastructure, we can do it incrementally. We can do it, for example, we can move the Ministry of Agriculture, Trade and Industry to Andros. We can move the School of Small Island Sustainability. But we need to begin to think out into next 20, 50 years. And you see, we could build a planned city. Nassau isn't planned.
No, I don't disagree.
We gave Wallace Groves 50,000 acres of crown land. In Andros, 65% of the land is owned by the crown. So you don't have to buy the land. If we could give Wallace Groves 50,000 acres to build the city of Freeport, we can give the people of this country who already own the land. Let us build a planned city as was done in Nigeria with Abuja, as was done in Brazil with Brasilia. In other words, it can. And then we have the best port in the country with Morgan's Bluff.
My friend, I'm with you in concept. Logistically, it's different when you have a road that could take you from Sao Paulo to Brasilia, or from wherever in Nigeria to it's a different, because you're now asking not just the structure, but you're saying, okay, 39 members of the House of Assembly, you're going to be living in Andros for a period of time, or that you're going to fly there every Wednesday. The courts, you're going to all be living in Andros. I mean, it's just a mammoth undertaking.
But the thing is this: if we could conceive how having the kind of national architecture to better serve the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and also to stimulate economic development, which is not waiting for superwoman or superman in the form of a foreign investor to come. No foreign investor could save me. The Bahamian people must save themselves.
Well, I'm going to say this to you. One, I think that we can move to Andros, but I think it's the reverse way around. I think we have to encourage development and mobility of people to those places first, and then we can relocate the capital. I think it has to come with mobility of people first. I know that
but we agree. In other words, you're just saying tactically, we should lay the foundation
for population to move.
But population moves on development.
Right. But I don't think it could be a housing development. It doesn't just have to be.
Yeah, but people need to work.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can build, like you say,
people need industry.
You can do the Ministry of Agriculture and the Defense Force and things like that. Yeah.
But we're talking tactics now.
Tactics.
But the point is, as a sovereign people, let us imagine, let us think of a future where we are building out the national institutions, not just here in Nassau.
Right.
We have a whole country to develop.
Right. Well, listen, Alfred, we got to go. Unfortunately, time eludes us, and I'd like to have you come back and expound into some more. I mean, because this is the kind of thinking we need. We can't just continue to, as I say, we're going to implode on each other if we don't do something different. But in terms of both infrastructure and ideas. But thank you for coming by.
It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, my friend. And we'll see you on Thursday, folks. Our guest then will be. Who did I say?
I don't know.
I said someone, and I forget now. All right, well, we'll try to do it later on, okay?
Aging country?
Yeah, aging country, aging mind. All right, thank you very much. Oh, Lowell Mortimer. How could I forget? Yeah. The relative of that suffragette.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
also
A pioneer.
the LJM Maritime
A pioneer.
Academy.
A pioneer, yeah. Someone who's outside the box. Thank you, Ken.